I'm going to go straight to the front of the Oz, and we're going to have a look at the front page headline, which is Big Banks Join Business Bailout. That's the headline. The big banks are negotiating a multi-billion-dollar business rescue package with the Morrison government that could see taxpayers underwrite loans to small and medium-sized firms facing collapse in a bid to avoid mass job losses and a deep recession. The Australian understands the government is considering a loan guarantee to keep businesses afloat as part of Scott Morrison's second-round economic rescue package, which could take the total government spend to more than $40 billion. Oliver Peterson, I'm going to go to you first in Perth. Now, you know, there's a number of elements to this story, and that's what makes it such a big story throughout the world. Obviously, the health implications, and we'll get to that shortly. But the way in which the economy, the way in which the fiscal outcomes and implications are starting to bite is a really, really big concern.
Huge concern, Gleeson, huge concern. And you look at the announcements that were made today by the Prime Minister, which has effectively just killed off the travel industry and the hospitality industry straight up. And you look here where I am in Western Australia, we've got 50,000 workers in hospitality. That's obviously just a small example of the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands across Australia who are working in the hospitality industry, and they're going to be facing some very, very uncertain times over the next 6 months at least, and longer. So look, the action obviously taken today by the Prime Minister is that these pubs are still open, the restaurants, the cafes, they're still open. Uber Eats came to the play a little bit later today as well, offering opportunities for restaurants to get on board. There's creative ways as well that a lot of businesses are trying to reach out and make sure that customers are still going to be spending their money. And I think that's first and foremost what is incumbent on every single Australian, Glee. So if they're feeling confident and they're feeling able, they must continue to support their local business. And I know I did that this morning in my local coffee shop, and made sure I went over to my local supermarket and just only bought some rock melon. I didn't need to go and pack up the boot of the car. I just needed one rock melon, and that was it, and I went home and enjoyed that. So they're the little things that we can do. But turning here to the banks and what's on the front page of the Oz tomorrow, this is really, really important. This is really crucial. Huge conversations, obviously, the Prime Minister and the Treasurer in particular will be having with the banks. And there's two models we can look at straight away. What's the UK doing? The underwriting of the loans that the UK is undertaking at the moment as well, and the banks in the United Kingdom, versus what we've seen in New Zealand, and whether or not there's going to be some sort of cash handouts and the like, which is given to businesses so they can continue to pay the wages. Huge decisions. I don't have any answers, obviously, Gleeson. This is something that'll be worked through. But what we have at the moment is, you know, I think really, really strong leadership from the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, and he's certainly walking the same line at the moment with all of the state premiers, and then we're getting the medical advice, of course, from our Chief Health Officer and the relevant state health authorities. So I think if there's anything to sort of take out of today, which has been a huge news day, in particular, is just what's come through in regards to our national coordinated leadership, and that's something that in a time of crisis, that's what we need, and that's what we're seeing, I think, in Australia.
Dan Petrie, I know you share Ollie's thoughts on the way in which the Prime Minister has led the country, particularly in the last 48 to 72 hours. I want to ask a question, which I will ask Ollie a bit later in the show as well. How do you think the Australian psyche is right now? Because I detect there's a weird funk out there. People are sort of apprehensive. I mean, everybody, and I mean everybody, is talking about this particular virus. Do you sense apprehension? Do you sense anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, like to Ollie's points, like I remember I covered the global financial crisis. I remember very clearly the swings, and again, they weren't as violent as what we're seeing at the moment. And again, there is apprehension, and it's also that apprehension in a time of crisis historically is un-Australian. So, you know, we are made of much tougher stuff than this, and you know, there've been a number of commentators around you know, Australia talking about the fact that, you know, like we haven't conducted ourselves well, particularly you know, the hoarding we've seen in supermarkets, and that apprehension really needs to give way to what we're very good at, and that's rallying around our small businesses, that's rallying around our elderly, and that's not leaving people behind. Again, you know, this country was built, you know, on the collective efforts of people from all over the world, and we need to go back to that really to address this, you know, how we deal with this corona crisis. And so, you know, in terms of, you know, the apprehension, time to park it and time to get back at what we're best at, and that's really leading the world in how to deal with a crisis. We saw it 10 years ago. You know, Kevin Rudd and Wayne Swan, to their credit, took the advice of Treasury officials and aggressively sought stimulus, and that did quite well. Sadly, Mr Rudd, though, has decided to play write a series of quite sad articles about, you know, criticising the Prime Minister. We need people pulling together in the one direction, particularly around, firstly, stabilising the economy. That's the first part. Getting the processes right in terms of social distancing, which has worked so well in Singapore, the neighbour to our north. And thirdly, getting on with business, and that's supporting our own. And if we do that, we will prevail.